Hi, Shaway.
Hi, Nicole. Nice to meet you here.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Uh,
London?
yes, I'm based in London. Are you in China right now?
Yeah, I'm in Shanghai. Yeah.
Oh, amazing, amazing. How are things over there?
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, it's relatively kind of normal in a normal sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's almost like what, especially in Shanghai, it has been quite safe and open for a while. But of course, we all know the world is totally different now.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad to hear at least things are calming down over there. It sounds like it's been a roller coaster in the past year. No, I'm super excited to speak to you, Shawai. You're arguably one of the most prolific fashion editors in China. You oversee a vast portfolio of digital and print productions, and now you're the group style editorial director for modern media. Um, Basically, I'm really happy to speak to you because you are a key opinion leader on kind of the fashion industry with and also kind of the Chinese market. Um, and I'm really inspired by and grateful for your push for sustainable practices within fashion in China, kind of also despite the uncertainties around coronavirus. So I'd love to ask you some specifics on that.
Yeah, that would be great because yeah,
Yeah.
that actually has been my focus in the past 2, 3 years. So not so much involved with the fashion media as usual anymore because I think the whole media landscape changed a lot. And then honestly, there are a lot more serious issue which we should care about, sustainability being one. And especially right now within the current crisis, I think a lot of issues will need to be, a lot of industry, a lot of way of doing things will be redefined. So I'm very happy to just exchange some ideas.
Yeah.
And I just check online of your work because uh, it looks amazing. But
Thank
that
you.
was last year or this year. Or
That was
those
Yes. So anything I have up prior to this new collection, which is sort of a smaller capsule being released with Helsinki, was my graduate collection from Central St. Martin's. So I graduated BA Fashion Print. So that kind of takes me to where I am now, which is that I'm a fashion designer, but also a digital designer. So it went really smoothly into kind of the sort of the graphic print element that I always gravitated towards at St. Martin's is now sort of being put to use in sort of a graphic design and kind of campaign design way. And this collection coming up is sort of a capsule that's sort of almost reimagining my, in a way, taking a lot of the references from my BA collection at Central St. Martin's, but then reimagining it in a way where actually it's sort of a consumable items of clothing, and B, that are sustainable in a way where all the pieces are fully circular. So not one piece in capsule doesn't basically isn't fully circular, doesn't start from somewhere that it can't end up coming back to. So that was really, really important for me um, when designing capsule. Um, but yeah, no, I'm really curious as to, first of all, why you find China a place to ignite real change. And I'd love to know, especially some specific changes you've pushed for, and also like what the general response has been.
uh, a general what? Sorry.
The
Okay.
sort of the response to the
So
specific changes
yeah.
you're pushing for
Well,
in
just
China.
make the story short, since it seems like we only have very little time. So I think my awakening to sustainability was about like 5 years ago when I first attended Copenhagen Fashion Summit. Because even being an important fashion editor for a long time, but like rarely know about that the social environmental impacts about fashion. So that kind of changed my whole mind. And then after I attend like a few times, I realized like for such important gathering like that, there's no Chinese people, and which for me is kind of weird and ridiculous because when you talk about fashion, China is the largest consumer market, and then was maybe still as the most like the largest manufacturing place. So we were talking about circle, right? So it holds both ends. But then, so while we're trying to solve the problem of fashion is its own system, but then you don't involve people who holds the biggest two ends, then how is that going to happen? So I decided, so this is something I can try to do. I mean, it's not like my sole responsibility because it's too big, because other people are also making different effort here. But I think I can raise a little bit more awareness, and especially to incorporate the, or maybe facilitate the dialogue. Because in China, I mean, in a lot of things you can know from social media, production system, cultural-wise, economy-wise, society-wise, it's all its own system, right? But somehow, if we believe, well, this is now, like the whole world should have much more fair exchange, and then we should all kind of have tried to create opportunity to have fair conversation. Of course, now it seems much more urgent to do that, but also more impossible. So we will see how to do that. But that's kind of my initial idea. So I'll try to increase the awareness here and also bring into kind of international dialogue levels. And then I think after I start doing that about 3 years ago, at least I do believe I raised a lot of awareness, especially among Chinese brands, because I think Chinese brands are on their way to become more powerful. Because for those who are successful domestically, now they are seeking they're not just a successful manufacturer or people like wealthy men selling a lot of clothes. They are also thinking, what does brand means and what is brand value? So I'm very happy I'll be able to convince some of them that sustainability should be one of your brand value. And that's how your company should commit to do that. So that's in a more corporate level. And then in terms of young designer, I find it's very inspiring because I think either they know or not knowing about that. And then a lot of them are educated abroad. So I think for young people, if you're educated under the current educational system, or you are well-versed in social media and more or less, and people cares about what's going on in the world, and they're all quite willing to adopt sustainability as one of their practice. But all you have to do is kind of try to help them how to choose materials, what is available, and then something like that. But I think most young designers are kind of self-conscious, like they need to be sustainable. And
yeah, no, I think that's amazing. And I think as well, I kind of as a young designer, I always find that whatever sort of education I can get on this subject is very welcome, and whatever sort of guidance, because I think that what you're saying about fashion education is kind of true. Like I think that the way we're still educating creatives, and I do think partially it's because we just haven't made that shift as to what the current industry needs. But I think it's very much about kind of experimenting and finding your voice. But I don't know that it's necessarily also about responding to industry needs as a designer, and kind of what it means to be a designer, what it means to be a person that generates products. So I definitely, I feel like the work what you do with young designers and sort of advocacy for sustainability really gives us something to point towards, because a lot of us graduate and we're not quite sure, we're not sure of how to navigate the industry, period. But we also, a lot of us know that we have certain values and have certain ways of what the system and the industry needs to become. And we're just kind of missing that kind of, there's kind of a gap between where we are and where we want to be. And so that's why I find you so inspiring, especially, working with China, because as you say, it really is the biggest consumer market, and so many creatives are from there, living there. So it's amazing that sort of on that side of the world, that these conversations are also happening. I don't know, do you see any differences in sustainability mindset and approaches between China and Europe?
Well, I think definitely there is, because I think here people are just kind of start warming up or gearing up to what is sustainable, what is important. And then one thing great about China is, especially young people, they learn things very fast. And once they decided, they can push things through. So you can very quickly to see something coming out. But the show side is they might kind of shortcut in the way of thinking. So they're probably not understanding an issue, because each issue is kind of complex and broad, right? So you need to kind of learn a lot to reach a certain kind of conclusion. But here people like to be efficient. So it's very easy to just lead to certain kind of end product and result without really elaborate on the process. So I think that's, for me, that's kind of main difference. But I would like to say, like, because you mentioned like designers, like it's for designing products, and then now like there's like things you want to incorporate your value to what the actual system are. But for me, I think there are many important things, especially now we're in a time which is crisis, and the crisis help us to really rethinking about where we are, the industry we are in, the system we are in. I think a lot is being redefined right now. And for example, and actually like this designer's job is really to produce product, or it should, and or it should be providing solutions on ideas. Well, I think it should be providing solutions and ideas. So you need to know what's the problem first, and you provide solution. And the solution can be, I don't know, realized in a product, in this kind of product, that product. And if you are a fashion designer, yeah, of course, like there's common sense. You might do skirts or pants or hoodies or whatever, but why not something else, right? It doesn't have to be those kind of set items, because I think with the new materials and new technology and new social need, or even now new crisis, I think new lexicons of a fashion will emerge. And I think that's what young designers are supposed to do, and then keep thinking. Like, I really like your approach about like trying to merge digital with physical, even though that was just a presentation, but it's all what we are facing right now. So I don't know, you have any like think further, like how do you really, what's the relationship really, how do you really merge digital with physical? And then is there any kind of project or experiment you're doing, or what do you think their ultimate relationships are?
So I think for me personally, my personal relationship between the digital and the physical kind of is centered around my practice around identity. So a lot of the work I do has to do with my real identity, which is sort of Ashkenazi Jewish. But then for my BA collection, I had kind of invented this alternate sort of Instagram persona that exists purely digitally. And then the collection was about kind of meshing the two and see kind of how those two can interact, if they can interact, but I would say the most striking thing that I realized from that investigation was that we have digital lives and we have real lives. We have two now. And so I think that when it comes to digital fashion, I kind of predict that digital fashion will come through to our digital lives specifically, and clothing in our real lives will become much more functional and structural, and maybe less about visuality, in the sense of like kind of showing who we are, unless it's sort of to do with some kind of sort of identity related presentation. But I think really the digital now, I think, is where we're going to start seeing our experimentation of self through fashion, because it just pertains to that digital identity, and it's so easy to construct a digital identity. And it's also so easy to have your digital identity, sort of your Instagram identity, your just whatever online TikTok. It's so easy just to construct a completely different persona than your real, especially because often parents can't see it. So that's also, it's also kind of, but that's kind of where I see it going. I think it could do that. It could also do something completely different. I think it's such a huge question, but it's interesting to see it start to be experimented post-pandemic, and also now when we're really starting to see the effects of climate change. So, it's going to be interesting for sure. I'm definitely, I'm so inspired by your work. I'm so grateful for the time you've given, and so honored to meet you.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to meet you too, because I like your answer, because I'm also searching this question. I think it's only now, like we start living more and more digitally, so we will need to adopt a certain quote unquote digital lifestyles. So within this new digital lifestyle, I mean, we will need new kind of, I don't know, fashion system or art system, or it wouldn't be called fashion or art or beauty anymore. It'll be something totally different. And then, so maybe that's one way of the young designer can start thinking about it. And then also people start monetizing on the digital space as well. So in a way, and then we can say, just roughly to say, it might be more sustainable to do things digitally than actually production things. But of course, because the whole digital life is so new, so no one is really measuring its impact yet. So is it really more sustainable? We don't know yet. But with the current kind of measuring system, it seems like it will be more digital than producing a lot of real products.
Yeah, I get that sense as well, for sure. It'll be interesting to see the direction it takes. And it'll be interesting to see the reaction to Helsinki as well, kind of the user, of how users interact with fashion in such a different context. I think that's something that we'll definitely be paying attention to. But
do we be forcing out of the virtual space?
I think we have a few minutes. I think,
So I'm very curious, like, how does the pandemic change the way you work on your collections?
Ooh, okay, so for me, the biggest change that the pandemic kind of forced me to do was to create my patterns digitally with Adobe. So basically, when I started kind of constructing the collection, designing it with the shapes, it was kind of in the midst of lockdown. And so I didn't have access to my studio space because obviously, we weren't allowed to go out. I was just at home. I didn't have the space. And so it was a case of like, how do I make patterns? And it ended up being that basically the patterns were constructed from PDF blocks and adjustments were made sort of digitally using Adobe. And that actually I found it allowed for a lot more mathematical accuracy as well, because you're kind of doing everything by maths. And it also eliminated just the whole issue of the amount of waste that comes into the pattern making and toiling process, sort of, mocking something up in paper, cutting it out in calico, putting it together, making adjustments, doing it, several times over for kind of one look. And so what it allowed me to do was test something out, and then interacting with my 3D designer, Martina, she would kind of send me the 3D render and we would have a look, and I would say, right, okay, so if this is the way it's fitting on the 3D rig of the model, I need to add this adjustment here and here and here. And it was instant and so just economically viable as well, because I really didn't have to, there were no expenses that went into pattern making as well. I just found it to be a really good process, and it's one that I'll adopt for the future, because I just found it to be so effective. It was such a happy accident, for sure. That's definitely right. I think we potentially have audience questions. Oh. I think we're actually right on the questions. I think we're all right on the questions. Sure. No, it's been absolutely lovely, Shaway, to meet you. I'm looking forward to seeing how your activism and advocacy progresses, sort of out of COVID and all the developments we're seeing environmentally as well. I think I'm optimistic.
Great. I'm looking forward to seeing more of your collections or projects or ideas.
Thank you, Shaway. Likewise. It's been absolutely lovely. Take care and be well over there. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay.
Care.
Bye.
Bye.